morning. Well, now that we've invoked the truth of the Tathagata's words, let me talk about pickleball. I recently started to play pickleball. And I say recently, but it's been coming, It's been 5 or 6 years. I started playing when I first came to Boulder from the relative isolation of my monastic life. I came to Boulder and I noticed that my brother-in-law was playing pickleball, He talked about it. And, as a teenager, I played tennis. Not very well. I wasn't all around pretty good athlete, but not very good at anything in particular. So I made it onto the tennis team, as the 4th best player in the school, and I lost most of my games. And so I gave it up, it wasn't fun. If you lose all the time, it's not great. And these humiliating defeats are difficult to take as a teenager. Anyway, I had other sports, swimming, triathlon, basketball, I don't know. So, but I know how to hit a ball across a net, most of the time. But, I started playing with my brother-in-law, but then he abandoned me. He had other people to play with. And I was busy, my son was born at the time, and I was writing a book, and the path of aliveness. And so I don't know, it never happened. Okay, but a few months ago, I found a couple of partners, and now I'm playing twice a week. And it's really coming out of, if I look closely, it's coming out of some kind of need. It's coming out of the need to have fun. Mostly, I would say. Okay, so then I'm using this word with caution, but it turned into a little bit of an obsession. There was a phrase that appeared in my mind at some point, and I even talked to a friend. She said, "How are you doing? What are you doing?" I said, "I started playing pickleball." And I said to her, "I want to play pickleball all the time. I want to give up my life and want to play pickleball all the time, every day." And I realized as I was noticing this obsessive flavor that wasn't viable. It reminded me of a time in my 20s when I got into salsa dancing, and it was, and this was a time when I had also just started sitting zazen, so I was a beginner in the art of Zen sitting. And this, the forms of the salsa dancing, like the internal feeling of motion and the image of it, of the forms, they followed me into my dreams. Like I was dreaming about it, and I was like, I couldn't let it go. I remember sitting in a train, looking out the window, and I was just thinking about salsa dancing while the landscape was coming, This is sort of an alternate reality. But this is interesting to me. It's like Pickleball doesn't follow me into my zazen. And zazen is just a kind of open space, and the passion, the obsession, does not follow me into zazen. I do other things, I watch YouTube videos about how to do an approach shot and, how to hold the paddle when I'm at the net and stuff, I want to get better. Like, it's not just a kind of disinterested way of just doing something. Now, I recently talked with a practitioner, and she reported to me about how she's picked up a passion that she discovered when she was quite young, if I heard it correctly, when she was a teenager. And it's gardening. And she was, I've known her for a while, and she was going through a difficult time in her life, She described it as just gray. And, I think various ways played into that. Various things played into it. Trauma, a death of a parent, dealing with complications in her life, etc. So, there's Zazen as a resource, and then there's gardening. Okay? So it just reminded me of what it's like to discover a passion. Rediscover it or something, right? Now, I found myself saying in the conversation, now that you have found gardening, make your whole life the garden. I don't know, I said that. But now, as you can tell, it's staying with me, and I'm wondering what I was saying, what I was meaning. There's something, we, in our culture, I think we sort of endorse or encourage people to find their passion. Find your passion. But there's something complicated about this, or delicate. When you invest yourself into a passion, your sense of aliveness that is clearly, expressed in that passion, let's call it, it's kind of domain dependent. It's like life splits into the passion and the rest of it. You feel alive in this particular activity that suits you, or that you have a knack for, or that you enjoy, and the rest of it could be split off. It can almost be like, when can I get back to pickleball? Like when I said I want to do it all the time, which means maybe you. And now I'm not talking about any particular person, right? I'm just taking it to a more general level. It's like your aliveness is placed in a particular domain, but not in other domains. There's something not right about this. I think we know that. Like in Zen, it's sort of like, that's why we when we do a retreat, like a sesshin, we do everything ourselves. Like we, do the cooking, we do the toilet cleaning, we take care of everything that belongs to the retreat. No, none of the activities are excluded as not part of the real thing, which is sitting zazen. Now make the garden your whole life. Now extend this sense of aliveness to every activity of your existence. But this does not devalue the gardening, right? Or this what we could name the passion. It's actually to have found a way to express your aliveness is very important. If you have not found this, this is also a problem. Okay, let me connect this with another conversation I've recently had. A practitioner asked me, and I'm going to use his phrase, which has a certain ring to it, and I kind of like it, even though maybe it's difficult as a term. He says, what is a realizational life? A realizational life. If you could say, like, what did he mean? Like, probably he meant, what is an enlightened life? And when I hear the word enlightenment, it's like, it has a ring to me that feels final. You are enlightened or you're not. You had an enlightenment experience. What is your life now that you've been enlightened? Dogen has this way of speaking about enlightenment that is, his word is practice realization. There's two words put together as one, or put together as not two. Our practice is the way we express our realization. And this practice is going on endlessly. We do not practice in order to reach realization and then be done with it. We are expressing realization that is always already there, but needs expression. The question then becomes is how do you express it? How do you express it? What is a realizational life? What is the expression of it? So I took the question that way. Well, I found myself saying, in this case, well, you will have, you have to have your life put in order first. It sounds severe. What do I mean by order? I'm actually questioning the word. It's like, do I really want to use that word, order? Yeah, I want to use it. There is a way that, the way I speak about the realization that we already have is aliveness. We already have an aliveness. Yeah, I really like the way Suzuki Roshi speaks about Buddha nature as human nature. Buddha nature is human nature. So, we have an aliveness. And this aliveness needs to be expressed and cultivated. To be a Buddha is to, in my, more, I'm hoping, sort of down to earth and kind of phenomenological, from the ground up words, is like, to be a Buddha is to be fully alive, in accord with how things actually exist. And this in accord with how things actually exist is a kind of order. Now, it's not a rules-based order, but it is an it's an orderedness that needs to be picked up and expressed. Now, the big terms for this order is impermanence, everything changes, and interdependence. Everything is dependent on everything else. And it's actually interesting that that kind of complexity, that order, is so complex that it cannot be grasped and put into clear rules. But there's an orderliness to it. Okay, and the aliveness that we have just by the virtue of being born, it can express itself in various disorderly and distorted ways. It can become hedonistic, or it can become obsessed with power, wanting to dominate, or just compulsive in various ways. Like, I want to play pickleball all the time now. Just neglect everything. All the responsibilities of my life. Passions lived in this way are actually not healthy. You'll find your passion and, neglect everything else. It's actually not going to work. It's destructive. When we say find your passion, we already imply and do it in harmony with everything else in your life. Now the precepts, are like this. The precepts are put your life in order. If we go around killing, stealing, misusing sexuality, lying, intoxicating body and mind, speaking badly of other people, praising self, being possessive, harboring ill will, and not honor our own spiritual path, we create so much chaos in our own lives and in the lives of others, which is our life, that you can't practice. So what interests me here is this is not morality imposed onto you. It's like put your life in order, because God says so, or because Daddy says so. It's kind of the same thing. Project in a projecting way. It's because you're finding that you cannot give proper expression to your own life if it's not in order. So there's for me, as I'm exploring this, there's a kind of progression of unfoldings. There's aliveness, and it needs a framework of recognition of order. If we're lucky, we get a good chunk of this just from our parents. If we're unlucky, we need to find it through the difficulties of our own life. We always have to find it through our own life, but sometimes, people are lucky and they get a good sense of that order through their upbringing. And then your aliveness needs to find expression in activity. What is that activity? Well, it's all kinds of ordinary activities that are necessary to stay alive, right? It's like eating and social skills, basic stuff. Supporting yourself, supporting others. So, activity. But also enjoyment is necessary, some level of enjoyment. Hence the pickleball. No, I enjoy most of the things I do. I feel very fortunate in that regard. So it's just adding something. Now, these activities that you find that express your aliveness, they need to take, that would be another unfolding, they need to take some form. What do I mean by that? It's a pretty general term, but to give it some form. This activity, is an expression, but it's like, imagine you're doing something, and it's an expression of your aliveness, but you don't stick with it. You don't commit to it. You don't repeat it. You don't observe, when you repeat it, how it's going. When you observe how it's going, what you're seeing folds back into the activity, and the activity gets refined. So you are approaching mastery. That would make, the opposite of mastery is dilettantism, or something, right? It's like you just do something, but you don't really care. But it's interesting, like this, what I call expressing your aliveness, it sort of requires something like to stay with it. It's almost naturally wants to gravitate to some mastery. And I don't mean that mastery in terms of some sort of objective measurement, but more like it's an attitude that you bring to what you do. Like, if we wanted to say something offhand here, it would be like, do it the proper way. Don't just do it willy-nilly. Do it properly. What is properly? Like in Zen, there's an expression called nyoho, right? Is do it in accord with the Dharma. We eat oryoki in accord with the Dharma. We don't eat it just like just sit down and eat. We eat it like, what is this nyoho? Like, what is this in accord with the Dharma? Like, I've sometimes said, it's like you develop a feeling for it. And you have a feeling for it. This is not the proper way to handle the bowls, to like bonk him down, bonk. Why do we, when we do things with attention and in a space of stillness, why do we feel some sort of affection for this bowl and its roundness, and holding it in our hands and putting it down, like, properly. What is that? But like, make your whole life the garden is like, shutting the door properly. Brushing your teeth properly. Now, if you do it as a kind of, if you do this with a super ego watching over you, properly is terrible. It's like, no, it's a different kind of proper, right? I like the word appropriateness, but not in this shallow way, appropriate boundaries or something. No, appropriate to how things actually exist in their impermanence and interdependence. Appropriate to the impermanence of our own lives, like, and the value that comes from that. So you give it some form, a proper way, your activity. And then, what I think is really interesting is, another unfolding is to realize this form as a way. The Japanese, from Taoism, the Japanese word is do. These Japanese art forms, the way of tea, the way of flowers, the way of, bearing arms, bushido, the way of the one who bears arms, martial arts. What is that? Like, what is turning an activity into a way? I think it's that gesture that came out of me when I said, make your whole life the garden that you tend. It's like you do one activity, tea, that's ordinary activity, making and serving tea, but now everything becomes relevant in this activity. The space that you make, the way you relate to the guests, the aesthetics of like how much tea in proportion to the water and how to whisk it, and everything matters. Everything is done the proper way. And then the whole thing starts to translate into, well, this becomes an example of how to live your life. Because all these dimensions that show up in how to make tea show up in all kinds of situations in your life. Your life becomes, making tea. Your life becomes the garden. As I was, like, these things were going on, present in me, realizing that I want to make a talk out of it, right? I realized, is there the way of pickleball? And I don't think so. Gardening can become a way. Pickleball? I don't think so. The way of pickleball? I don't know. Nobody's tried it. Why? There are certain activities, I think, that are exemplary of impermanence and interdependence that other activities are not. Like gardening, you have to wait for things to grow. Like, it teaches you something about patience. Well, you could say, when you rally, in a racket sport, it teaches you something about patience too. But it's just funny, to have a pickleball court, you have to pave over what the garden would work with. I mean, there's the nature of competition, that animates sports is fun, but I think it took a lot out of Japanese culture to turn the art of killing people into a way of life. The samurai didn't just gravitate to like, oh, let's, become wise people. They really needed to learn to kill people. And martial arts has to like transform into energy work. You can most visibly see it in Aikido, right? It becomes, or Tai Chi, it's like, it's a martial art, but now it's like, it's exploring the body energetically and how it relates to the cosmos. Like, that's a long way to realize that a certain activity actually puts you out of accord with things, with the way things are, but because it's a human activity, now you're turning it into a way, a wisdom way. I never expected that pickleball should become a way. I just wanted to do it. Who knows how long I will do it. I already have a way. I'm already finding this practice to be a way that opens up into all kinds of dimensions of my life. Now, Zazen as an activity is not enough. Zazen, in my book, is something like, in my way of thinking, is like, it's one way to, it's all kinds of things, but I'll say one thing here. It's like you're resetting yourself into the source of your own aliveness. It's not dependent on a particular activity. It's not dependent on a particular domain. I would say that my initial awakening that came out of Zazen and how it turned my life around is that I felt, I've used this phrase before, unapologetically alive. Well, I was going through a difficult time in my life. I was looking for something. Somebody takes me to a zendo, I get some instruction, I sit down, and I'm arriving in the presence of my own body-mind in a way that I hadn't experienced before. It's like, oh, I'm alive. And I don't have to justify anything about that. It's just here. It's happening. I turned my life around. It's like, oh. Here before, as I'm in my head, I'm trying to like comply with the culture or, with myself, with the thoughts about myself, putting myself onto some kind of path, making something happen, and I felt, made me depressed, tense, anxious, all of it. That can happen, it can happen at any time in your life. Like you're dedicated to some idea or some project and now you've set yourself on that track and then it's like, okay, sit Zazen, come back into the openness of your own aliveness. It's just savor this source of that source. It's like, it's a well. It's just like, keeps giving. If you turn Zen into some path and like an instrumentality, now you want to use Zazen to get somewhere, become enlightened or, Most people have given up on that anyway. But it's like, do something with it. Create calmness or overcome your anxiety. It's already overcome. It's like just appreciate the presence of your own aliveness. Just appreciate it. That's just sitting. But I said it's not enough because this aliveness does seek expression. I mean, you can disagree with me or like, I have no justification for that. This is my observation. It seeks expression. Well, it's not something mysterious like some extra seeking expression. No, but you've got to live, so you've got to do some expression. If you make breakfast, that's an expression of your aliveness. If you don't make breakfast, that's an expression. Now, how do you do it? How do you live your aliveness? And so the need to find a path is actually just already inscribed into our nature. It's like it's not something we really have much of a choice about. We can neglect it. I think that what I'm naming right now, provisionally, but not badly, I think. What I'm naming as aliveness, order, expression, form, giving that expression form, and then opening it into a way. This is a kind of natural unfolding. It sort of wants to happen. It's like, what I mean by natural is like if you plant a seed and the seed kind of wants to grow into a tree. I think our human situation is such that you can't sit back and just watch the unfolding. Because you are the unfolding. You need to find a way to participate in it. And the way to participate in it is to give attention. You give attention to the source of aliveness, the need for order, the seeking of expression. Like these things need to kind of like be felt, The interest in giving it form and shape, this desire for a certain level of mastery to avoid being a dilettante at life. And then to open it into a way so that it can flower into wisdom. So I think what I'm saying right now is like I want to encourage you to notice these in your life. Now, one last wrinkle. In the practitioner who says, I have found gardening, I rediscovered this. Something has succeeded, right? There's an activity that expresses aliveness. But we also fail at this. And let me give you a few modes of failure. Okay? One failure is deferral. You defer this expression to the future. Like a classic example would be like, well, I'm going to do this job. I'm going to save for retirement. And when I'm retired, then I will really live. It happens. I'm not saying this as a criticism, but it's a kind of, the deferral is actually a protection mechanism. Because I'm not finding the activity that really expresses my aliveness, the core activity that I can turn into a form, I'll say like, well, that's going to happen when I retire because there's a cultural narrative that tells me that, it's a prudent thing to do to make a living, and which it is. But, like you can say, like, there's a certain aliveness in us in one domain and the other domains are getting neglected, like the passion, the obsessive passion, right? Now the split is between the present and the future. The aliveness is placed into the future and is not happening now. Well, then you're not feeling fully alive. Deal with that. I'm not criticizing it. It's just like, if you give attention to it, you will see the structure. I mean, maybe you accept it, but maybe you feel like, oh. I mean, the turning word for that would be live now as if you will never retire. I mean, if this is the problem, right? Live now as if you never retire, and then maybe never retire. Always have something to do. Like, it's funny, if retirement is like, now I have nothing to do, that's also weird. You were looking forward to that time as being the real time of your life, but then you actually have nothing real to do. Or it becomes a task to find that. So, whether you're retired or not, live as if retirement is never happening. It's not happening. You're just alive. The other displacement, distortion, failure mode is something like I want to name as nostalgia. Like, there was a time in the past when I was really alive. Today, it doesn't compare so well. And that can happen because of various reasons, It's usually loss. Lost something. Youth, strength, a partner, your homeland. And the intervention is the best time of your life is now. It's a provocation because the person who's nostalgic really has good reason to compare the time right now as unfavorably to another time, because there's something objectively true about this. It's like, it was better when I still had a leg to walk with. I'm not making light of this, right? But still, it's a trap, because it's like Yunmen's every day is a good day. The best time of your life, not in terms of comparison, but in real lived energy, the best time of your life is now. Every day is a good day. It's not objectively true, but you need to turn it in that way, or else you're in the trap. And the third failure mode I want to name, there are probably more, but these are the ones that come to mind, is longing. A better life somewhere else, or imagined, like envy is a form of that. It's like, if I could only live the way this person lives, if my life was only this way, then I'd be fully alive. And the intervention here is like, the only life the life that you have here now, that you are living here now, is the only life that's not imagined. All other lives are imagined, and thus not really real, and thus not really satisfying. They can't be. Social media is importing this now into, I'm off social, I never got on social media, lucky me, but it's a comparison machine. It's a comparison machine.
Is it appropriate for me to wait?
Yeah, I'm almost done. 2 minutes. These realms in which you can continually imagine yourself other than your life actually is. I'm not saying everyone is doing it, but the offer is there now all the time in all directions. So here too, this is the first joint here between aliveness and expression. If aliveness is displaced into the future or into the past or into another person or into another realm, you're not really coming into your expression. And that can be a place we're in. Notice it. There's no other remedy for it. Notice that. Being awake to it, then it's already a realizational life. Thank you very much.